Welcome back to Tabletopped.
Got him. I'm your host, baby-ass Nick. I'm turning 31.
I literally felt an unreasonable amount of stress as I looked around and saw you all getting closer to your mics to fuck up the intro. Welcome to Tabletop. This is Nick, your host. Today we are with some of my best friends. Who are you?
Franco.
You don't know who your best friends are?
I'm trying to be inclusive.
You're an idiot, baby. This is Rio.
Man, I'm really glad we had lunch because the energy is just so
Rio's
good now.
spicy today.
That is a spicy meatball.
I'm Shade.
He was calling out Shade earlier, too,
I
about
know.
being a liar.
Oh, yeah. Because I'm in sales and sometimes you fluff things.
Oh.
Yeah, always fluffing.
You always got to be fluffing, guys.
Always be fluffing.
Rio's making a chessboard on his computer.
Yeah,
I
Rio
am.
is maybe one of the most professional podcast hosts that I've ever seen.
You don't get paid
Bitch
for this.
I'm pretty sure in the McElroy book it does talk about making a chessboard.
That's totally
Yeah.
true. Also, Rio, can you get a little closer to your mic? Just give us some of that sultry voice. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Rio.
What are we doing? What are we talking about today, Rio?
You haven't introduced the topic yet. What the fuck you want me to do?
You already introduced it.
I'll introduce the topic.
That was fucking with him.
Yeah,
By the way,
he's
my
fucking-
chessboard. I know you didn't introduce the topic. You guys just hate that I like chess now.
We don't want you to get good at it.
Pawn to E1. What's your next move?
Yeah, what opening are you going to use?
what
obviously, I'm
opening?
going to do little horsey up front.
Oh, I'm bold.
I was
Which
gonna
one?
take a drink and you
Well,
said Little
Franco,
Horsey.
left
Franco,
one.
he's doing Little Horsey Open?
Oh, a little horsey opening?
That's pretty
I'm
good.
doing a little horsey open.
Okay, geez.
I'll take my own night out and defend the pawn that he's attacking right now. What are you gonna do?
I'm going to attack your knight with my sorcerer, obviously.
What?
Yeah, classic chess move.
Fuck,
Anyway,
wizard chess.
so today we're
I'm
going
gonna
to be
flip the goddamn
talking.
board.
Wait, no, Shade's also here.
Yeah. I said my name earlier.
Push my D pawn too.
All right, so yeah, what
can
we're
go all
going to be
at
talking
once.
about today is we're going to talk about the
Wizarding chess.
wizarding chess.
We start over.
Maybe.
This is golden.
This is gold.
I think the topic's pretty light this time around, so we can fluff this
Yeah,
up.
we can fluff for as long as we want.
We're fluffing it,
Let's
yeah.
just, hey, guys.
was the
do you want
topic?
do you want to sit in a room and fluff with me? Is that what we want to do?
Oh,
Okay, so what we were actually going to talk about was like building sort of like a journey mechanic into your game. So this specific idea came from the recent PvP game that we did over our annual weekend trip, and we went into Shade's really well created dungeon.
Thank you.
And there was sort of a tarot card sort of journey mechanic that happened within that was just like something that we wanted to talk
like a
about.
labyrinth we were navigating.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And like how to do that in a way that isn't tedious and slow because, you know, there's the classic trope of, I see an empty room in front of me. You draw it out on like a dry erase grid or something. And then you're like, okay, what do you do? And everyone's like, okay, I touch this space. Does anything happen? Do I touch this space?
Why would you do that?
To be safe.
No, don't do that.
And what Shade did was something completely different. So Shade, why don't you just kind of run through what you created?
Yeah, so it was a large dungeon, and I wanted a section of the dungeon to be this vast maze. I had decided ages ago, because this thing that we do, I usually build out maps and things like that, and I was like, I'm not going to build out a massive maze. That makes no sense. I don't have the space for it.
Plus, everyone could see it when you put it down on the table.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
Exactly. But I had this tarot deck set from D&D, and since we were playing in 5e.
For our listeners, tarot is witchcraft, so hashtag content warning.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you listen any further, you will go to hell.
Oh, Jesus.
Jesus can't save you now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. No. Anyway, the
Cross
idea.
Jesus.
Well, technically,
We
Jesus
crossed
was
Jesus
probably
save
a
us.
witch because he resurrected himself. And if you watch American Horror Story Season 3 Coven, the ability to pull yourself out of hell is a witch power. Jesus was a witch.
I don't like any magic system or class system that relies on Ryan Murphy in any way.
Wow, you like class systems?
Yeah, I kind of do.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm kind of into it. I
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I like
when-
everyone having abilities that are unique to themselves. That's
Yeah,
fun.
like the
That's
working
fun.
poor, the middle class. and
Oh
the-
yeah, some of us need to dig ditches, Franco.
Oh my God.
Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps if you don't like it.
No, if for everyone listening at home, as I
Pulling
was
yourself up by your bootstraps is an impossible feat.
It's an impossible feat.
Made to be like you can't actually do that.
It was
And
actually, it was made as like a make fun of Americans for saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because Benjamin Franklin is always credited being like, oh, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. But like,
You literally say that?
yeah, but in
Like,
England,
non-ironically?
but in England, everyone would be like, oh, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, describing an impossible feat.
I'm not going to fact check this, but I am going to say I'm not sure if Franklin was attached.
No,
to
he
that.
didn't. He didn't say those words. But basically, all of his letters to his sister back in England were like, "I'm doing this on my
Okay.
own. I am self-sufficient." When he's just getting like a bunch of money from his
Right?
family.
Yeah. No, he was. Yeah.
And so like,
It's like Walden.
yeah, exactly.
I like fucking.
I like
Walden's
how
the biggest.
No, but I think like people misinterpret Walden, but I'm pretty sure it's like no, the idea was that I was alone, not
Yeah.
that I was like self-sufficient.
Sure.
Yeah.
But he was alone and took his laundry to his mother. Like.
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever.
He's not really
He wasn't
alone.
really
Yeah.
immersing himself in nature, which is what he kind of proclaimed that he
Yeah.
was doing.
Yeah. Walden Pond's nice though. Anyway,
Do you know
so
that Waldron Pond is like 90% piss?
I believe it.
Yeah.
Gross.
It's they literally have to shut down the pond sometimes because the sheer amount of people who pee in the pond changes the pH level, and they test for that. And so then
So-
they're like, "Oh, the pond's closed."
Where does the water come in from?
Where's the water?
What's the source
coming?
of the water? Yeah.
Well, it's a pond, so it doesn't have like a river.
Well, yeah,
flowing
they
in.
definitely shouldn't be
Yeah.
peeing in there.
So I'm just gonna. I mean, since we're entrenched in this discussion real quick,
Yeah.
this is a large part of why I do not swim. Period. Like I just don't want to.
Is it pee pee poo poo?
I do not like the idea. I like we had a hot tub at the place we go for the
Yeah.
weekend. Nah, I trust y'all, but
Hey,
nah,
you were smart because
I'm
I
good.
was.
Yeah, I'm sure you were.
You were pissing?
Yeah, I was pissing the whole time.
But no, anything like that, I'm like, nah. Things are shitting and
Listen.
pissing in this. I don't need to be
Listen, in any time you want to make a good soup, you just have to assume that there's going to be a little bit of piss in there.
Jesus Christ.
Wow.
Anyway, back to what did you
just say?
And we're actually trying to discuss what we're talking about.
I went to a fugue day. Here's what I did for this
Nick's
game.
just mad at us for going off topic.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
Jesus.
I'm always mad at. That's my secret. I'm always mad at you fuckers.
All right. Let me just read the copy that I had. So they get to a maze. Having escaped the first room, you now find yourselves in a vast twisting maze. Who knows what dangers lurk in the maze or how long it will take you to find the vaults. We're going to stay in initiative, but we're also going to abstract the passage of time a bit more with a mini game. Here's how the game works. On your turn, you are leading the charge through the dungeon, rolling Wisdom Survival. There isn't a failure to this roll. Rather, the roll will determine how successful you are in making your way through, namely determining how many cards you, the player, are going to pull from a special deck. So I had a deck, tarot deck,
cards, yeah.
that was specifically D&D themed that I wanted to use, and I divided the deck into various smaller decks.
Yep.
And assigned specific things to each of these cards. So the goal for each team was to either draw the sun or the moon card. Sun card is your escape card. Moon card is your escape card, just depending on which team you're on.
Was that 6th edition? 6th generation? Sun and Moon?
I don't understand the
That's a
reference.
Pokemon reference.
thing.
No PP in that suit.
I think it was 7th.
You got to stop.
And
You gotta stop.
and like no matter when you drew that card, it would be 3 turns later that you would be able to exit. Was the idea largely?
Once everybody had gone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
once-
when Shade says turns, each turn was
Each-
a full, a player's full turn. But
Yeah.
the entire round, at the end of the round, if you had drawn a sun or a moon, you were out of the maze.
You're done. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like this was really just a skill check dungeon with some basic copies. So you draw a card. And maybe it's a safe space. Maybe there's a treasure in this room, or maybe it's an encounter. The vast majority, I would say, were encounters, and they would have various little checks where it would say something like, oh, you've come across an ogre, and I need one of you to make an athletics check to determine what happens here.
But certain classes would be able to overcome them
Correct.
immediately, which I thought was a really interesting idea.
That was pretty smart.
Yeah, it was like the ogre was like, oh, you want to wrestle and you have to like roll a strength check, unless you're a warrior, which means that you're just like kind of overcome the ogre, because if you're
Yeah.
base
If
skills.
there's like this thing in your party, if there's this class in your party, then you just skip the.
yeah, it's like,
the
how do you want
encounter,
to
more or
cross
less.
the water? Oh, you have a monk, he runs across the water.
I think it was very cool to have it as like this is how we're handling this, because it was part of a larger thing.
Yeah.
I think if I were to just run this, I would definitely have done something slightly different.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I
but
kind
I
of-
think for our purposes, it worked really well because we were like, let's kind of go through this like little card game.
Here's the thing, though, about it, which I really liked and it sort of got me thinking. We've done like exploration topics several times on the podcast, and we've always kind of been like, man, like I don't feel like that's the best option. But
Yeah,
that
because
is,
nobody listens to me and agrees with mine.
Exactly. But I kind of like this as a way.
Between episodes, I want to remind
Oh my God.
Well, like, listen up for that episode coming out soon. But one thing that I really liked about this was that it was a way to still make it feel like the trip was packed full of things.
Yeah.
Without being slow and kind of gamey. It was like kind of a mix of game and RP, which I liked, but like because the mechanic required that.
I think it was very
liked it.
gamey though.
Yeah, it's like very
very
gamey,
gamey.
Super gamey,
but felt like we were participating. You know what I mean? Like it felt like a how you feel at the end of a journey where you're like, wow, so many things happened.
I think the card draw mechanic was part of that too, right? Because you're like, oh, we're drawing cards, we're progressing, we're trying to get the deck down.
yeah, because if you were successful in an event, you could remove cards from the deck.
Exactly.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah,
To get you
so
closer, and then if you failed, you would put the card back in and then reshuffle the deck.
Yeah.
So, and this is, I'm not a big fan of crit fail, crit success, like hyper focus on those, hyper swings. But this is one thing where I did have that. So if you critically failed on your wisdom check on your turn, that means that you would draw the card, resolve whatever was on it. You were going to reshuffle that card back in, but you were also going to take from your side deck and shuffle more, so it became a larger deck for you to contend with. Whereas if you critically succeeded, you drew 3 cards, chose which one you wanted to deal with, and discarded all of them, so your deck exponentially decreased, because it was only like a 25 card deck.
Yeah. One thing I really liked about it too is like, especially as a mechanic that you could slap onto other things as well. Like you could make the mechanic, instead of making the deck shorter to indicate the journey going on and like you're getting closer to your end, you could just like have the deck mechanic be anytime the party moves from place to place, you're doing that. And the more they kind of like screw up quotes in the thing, like they fail rolls or whatever, you just add combat cards into the deck of like wolves or bandits or whatever, because they see like, ooh, an easy target, they're not doing, they can't navigate this wood very well. So like I just thought it was like a really cool way, because it never felt like, oh, the GM is doing something to me. It was all like, oh, this randomly happened, this is what happens.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, really, the whole thing was random.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
To your point, what if like you had a random encounter cards and you fought so many of like the large monsters that you run into more of like the smaller monsters because they're overpopulated now, so there's more chance that you have to deal with a smaller threat because you've killed all the bigger threats.
I mean, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love from a GM side that you can kind of, because we've also talked about adding things into a game that don't really matter, you know what I mean, to like flesh out a session or something. Like this way, you could actually prep beforehand and have reactions for each of these cards, no matter what they do, if you want, and just play with them for the rest of the campaign. You could have this deck of cards, you know what I mean?
To kind of Franco's point, and your point, Nick, as well, about this being travel based. This is kind of my summary of how I view travel in a lot of these games, because in my mind, it's the starting point and the end point. The stuff in between is, you know, cinematic shots of the actors walking through New Zealand.
Yeah.
And you know, there's like set pieces that we're trying to get to, and that's very much what was happening here. There was a starting room, and we're trying to get to this other room, and there's something in between. And you can take this and you can use that anywhere. It doesn't have to be a dungeon specifically. It is meant to be a journey mechanic, and a pretty simple one. And I also, I read that copy. I was adamant that this this trip takes you a long time, and I wasn't like recording that time, but my indication was this takes several days, but your resource use remains the same.
Yeah.
And you could also be damaged by all these. Like if you failed a persuasion check, against a kobold who stood defiantly in your way, then that would deal, depending on how big your failure was, it was always like a DC 15, but if you failed by a certain measure.
But a key point is that every time we failed, we did keep moving forward
correct.
through the dungeon.
Basically, it was reducing of resources for when we arrived.
It would reduce your hit points specifically.
Yeah.
And I think it is important to point out that this was part of a larger thing because we were trying to get to the end. We were trying to get to the vault room with as many resources as we could have. So it was essentially
we were about to have a big fight.
It was essentially like a big kind of randomized like.
Yeah. It was basically playing through a table, which I thought was fun.
Yeah,
Though Well, I will say one of the things that I did notice that maybe would be hard if you were using this mechanic over a longer period of time is the chance of repeat, just like the variance.
We had
of the
repeat.
decks.
You did have a repeat.
repeats.
It was for you guys, and you're the only ones that got it.
We
as
found
well.
the safe spot a couple of times.
You found
multiple
two different
yeah.
safe spots, but you specifically found this fucking guy, an archfey who was riding around on an elk, and you never had a good time with him.
No, he always beat the-
He
he
always
just like
beat
a
the
drum.
shit out of you guys.
I think if I were to implement this mechanic in some way, I would want to find some way where the players had some kind of agency over this.
Yeah.
I think I really enjoyed it because it was fun because you're just drawing cards, doing random stuff, and then moving on, which I think can be really fun if your table doesn't necessarily like that level of not having that much control over it, even though it still felt good because you're just kind of like, let's randomly get through something. But it's like if you don't like that, like what do you think you guys would do if you were like?
I know exactly what I would do.
Can I speak to what I tried to do with it?
Yeah.
Because it would be like, let's say it was Rio's turn. Rio rolls a survival check to see how many cards he's going to draw. He does really well. He's able to draw two and choose between them. And he's going to be able to discard one of them, the one that we resolve. He chooses, and I would say, well, this is going to be one that is a deception check, or this is going to be one that's an animal handling check, or if you have a barbarian, you automatically succeed. You don't have a barbarian in your group, but someone feels like they have good animal handling. It's not left to Rio's character to make that skill check. It's as a group, one of you is going to get that choice. So I wanted to have that level of agency in there, but that was very nominal agency.
Yeah.
So I do think you could get much more in the weeds on it.
Because effectively, since we have a whole team, we know what we would always go with this person for deception. We would always go for this person with animal handling. So effectively, the role remains the same. It's just the characters that you created are better suited to certain percentage chances of succeeding at something.
Yep.
And right after this break, we will talk about what we will do, or what we would do, to change it up for our own games.
Hey everyone, it's me, Nick, from the Tabletop Podcast. When I'm not hosting, I'm thinking about ways to create a better podcast for you guys, and I think I landed on something pretty fun. In fact, if you go to our Patreon at patreon.com/tabletop and join for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to a new episode a month that we're going to start putting out. In fact, we're going to be calling this one Wild Magic, I think, in that we're going to talk about anything and everything that interests us, not just TTRPGs, though there will be a lot of that. It is truly unhinged, and if you are a fan of the podcast and all of the hosts, you're definitely going to want to be on it. We're thinking of dropping these at the end of each month, so join our Patreon today. That is patreon.com/tabletop. Oh, and there's going to be so much more coming out in the new year there, so don't miss it. Sign up today.
Welcome back, everyone. We're talking about journeys and getting through dungeons randomly. Card-based
labyrinth resolution systems.
Name of the episode. Nice. So here's the thing that I would do. Very much what you were trying to do, Shade, where you said that. I think basically very similar to what I would do. I would just say, if you roll a certain survival or whatever mechanic you're using to determine wayfinding, if they roll high, they get X amount of cards to choose between. If they roll low, they get 1. And maybe in the middle you get 2. I wouldn't give them what's inside each of them, but I would let them be like, do we want to try something new? Or we know that one. Like, we know we can get through that one.
So puzzling it out more.
Yes, exactly. So it's like, if they really, like, if that elk person is behind, you know, the tower card, and we're just getting, like, totally destroyed every time we see the elk man. We could, you know, pull...
The elk man cometh.
We pull 3 cards when we see, you know, the tower, and we're like, that fucking elk man's gonna beat us up. Let's go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like, that kind of thing. But that would be my, like, really low, like, tweak. Just so that it requires the players to be engaged enough to track which cards or whatever that you're pulling and which ones they like and which ones they don't. What about you two?
I would play a system that I've been trying to like fiddle with, whereas I would have someone declare themselves the sort of
The leader.
the leader, the pathfinder, and they would roll to see how many cards that they would pull, and then maybe someone else could roll to see like of those cards like which way they someone else can decide from that which cards to pull. And basically, I see it as a really good way to like interact with the environment between places. As all right, we have to go this way. I made a survival check of a 5. That means we got to go through 7 cards. We got to do 7 things from the like. Obviously, the less you pull, the faster you go. So you do a poor roll, you get more cards. That might be you just find like 7 resources, and that's a great trip. You're lost a little longer, and maybe that means you find those 3 tough monsters and 2 tough ones. Like, oh, we really are fucked up today.
Literally, as you were speaking, this popped in my brain too, and you were talking about it.
Right,
so
that's
I
how
agree.
ideas get transferred. I say
To
them,
me.
you hear them, and then you put them in your memory.
But I think that you could do that in a really interesting way too. Of like you said, you roll high, you draw more cards, but you can also
His way wasn't interesting.
No, hey, everyone, calm the fuck down. We're too hot after lunch. So what I would do is like maybe put, like you said, resource cards or stuff that they can get via the journey if they want to invest in like really scouring the countryside as they go through the journey.
Yeah.
But they could also be like, we're just fucking staying on the road. We're going as fast as we can through, and maybe that limits the amount of draws they have to make.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, but they could also be like, I want to invest resources into like really making sure that this trip is productive. It's like, oh, you find like this card symbolizes a goblin cave. You see treasure inside, but there's like 4 or 5 goblins. Whatever it is.
I have an idea.
Okay, Franco, it's your turn. What are you going to say?
I would make it a deck builder.
I would build a new game.
Build a new game. Yeah. Or, I mean, you could use the tarot cards, right? Each of us gets a hand of 5. And then as we go through the dungeon, through the whatever, if we defeat a thing, we take that into our hand. We can use different things as resources and stuff like that. If you like, oh, I beat the elk guy or whatever, I get his elk. And now you can use the elk in whatever way you want as well. And so it's not a specific thing. It is a more nebulous thing. And so you're kind of like, okay, I'm going to use this elk, and like you come across like an ogre, and like I'm gonna kill the elk and feed it to the to the ogre to distract him, or I'm gonna ride this elk across the river or whatever.
Get the ogre to chase me or whatever.
And then you like expend that card, and then you kind of go through the deck that way, or you decide to accept the failure. Maybe you lose some resources. Maybe you have to discard as many cards as. Perhaps there's like a difficulty value on it. And again, I think you could still do this all with tarot cards.
Yeah. And I kind of like the idea too of, because the main resource that we were kind of betting with in this way was our health. I think that it could be interesting to involve more different types of resources as well.
So,
and I think that you probably have already thought about this as well, but like you come into a thing where it's like, oh, if you're a sorcerer, you get by for free. But also, if you're just like a spellcaster, you can give this amount of like spell slots or
I think a good way to do that
grimoires
too is like, because like every class has some kind of expendable resource, the value of that resource is dependent on how many of it that you have.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so like
that's pretty good.
It's like, oh, a barbarian has 3 rage charges. You have like 33%, like 33 points or whatever per thing. But if you have like 10 spell slots, it's like every spell slot is a certain value.
Yeah, but kind of
between like a wizard has a different level than like a warlock.
Sure, but like I think too, like that would be interesting. You'd really have to RNG it a little bit, because a 9th level spell slot is worth different than a 1st level spell slot. So you'd have to figure out that.
It'd definitely be worth different.
I'm also picturing like if you're going to use it as like a journey thing, the cards like pass fail have different like time resources pulled. Oh, you succeed? This takes you 30 minutes. Oh, you failed? It takes you an hour.
Agreed.
And you only have 8 hours to get to your destination. So it's like, oh, these failures are stacking up.
put it
Now
on
we've
the
got to
clock,
start using
yeah.
our actual. We have to figure out what resources we have that we're willing to sacrifice to make that,
would
a
have been
success.
that would have been pretty cool too, because I think it was basically like a full round of all of us going was one turn.
Yeah.
And since it was the premise of the game was like both two
We're
teams
racing. Yeah.
were going through their own mazes to get through to the middle location.
Mm-hmm.
And if that had been part of the penalty, then it would have been like, oh, you can take an extra turn and get through this.
Yeah.
I specifically thought about this because again, this is a journey, and time is such an important part of any travel. I cannot tell you how often I think about just like if I could just instantaneously be somewhere instead.
I always think about wings. When I
Yeah.
get off the train and I'm thinking of
buffalo wings.
between the train and my house, God, if I could just fly over all these
I had
other
some really good
fucking
wings
buildings, I could
earlier.
get there so quickly.
Yeah, I think
That was
about that
in
on a
Austin.
nice sunny day, but most of the time it's just, what if I could just, be there right now?
I like the journey though.
It's not the journey, or it's not the destination. It's the journey.
No, it's
Shade.
the fucking destination.
Destination.
I can't believe you got that quote wrong. You've heard it 1,000
know.
times in your life.
So anyway, I thought about that
you're really
specifically,
coming
and why I didn't end up utilizing it for this particular game is I realized I really wanted to make sure that we had a chance to potentially have a duke it out inside of that center space.
Which surprisingly you hit really well.
More or less, you guys.
I am
yeah.
so shocked that whatever
We
design
came in
that
like
you,
a turn later.
yeah, we separate people with separate class constructions going through a deck which was randomly pulled, and we basically both got like 10
Yep.
rounds or something like that, or 10 turns.
it was 11 and 15.
That was it.
Yeah. No. It was you were one turn behind them in entering. So I think it was 11 and 12. But you
No,
guys
you know
didn't
where-
actually come in until 15 for.
This is the thing, is that
Oh, we waited.
because of our
Yeah.
little strategy. So yes, we were 50. Yeah.
But anyway, that's because, and Franco already kind of identified this here. At the end of the day, because you're choosing who's doing the skill check, it's always the same roll, more or less, because you all are the same level, so you have the same proficiency modifiers and things like that. I was very pleased that it worked out as it did, but I really wanted to ensure that we would all be at that room at the same time, and then also wanted to instead kind of like use the time as a round sacrifice. I never wanted to leave initiative, and I wanted to use it as a round sacrifice of I spend more time in there to ambush them when they come through, or to set traps and things like that. That's where I wanted that time to be lost. And that's actually, I think, why the other group got the sun card real early.
Yeah, but stayed.
and stayed to do 3 rounds of traps.
Yeah.
Oh, they trapped the maze.
And we
Yeah.
fucking discarded every single
because you
one.
saved
I
because we saved our
loved
trap
it.
tracker
Until
detectors. Yeah.
correctly did that. You guys, you played the game correctly.
Wow.
We were really good at it.
we were really good at it. We absolutely crushed it.
You 100% did.
One thing that this kind of reminds me of, or like it kind of feels like we're doing, is like, how do you make D&D more of like an OSR in this way? Because it is kind of like that, where you're presented with a problem.
That's because they're all the same game.
Yeah, exactly. But
They are.
it is sort of like, instead of using the D&D mechanics of like trap finding, whatever, the class mechanics and the exploration or whatever, in this way, for the sake of time, we were given a problem, given a solution, and then just sort of like went through it in a way that felt very classless in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I think that it kind of felt OSR-y to me, because you're sort of like coming into a room and you're like, oh, there's this thing here. We're not just immediately going to fight it, which is like a D&D thing.
Well,
Instead,
I
we
mean,
did like a skill challenge, and if you were to continue making this for like another game,
skill
or whatever,
challenges.
Yeah.
That's not.
That's not
like
OSR.
That's
Right.
not really an OSR thing. Yeah.
But like, if you wanted to do this, you could just like essentially use them as you like draw the card, read the situation if you wanted to do a random dungeon.
And then you would just present your solution to the DM, and they
Yeah.
would adjudicate it for you.
Exactly.
I feel like that would be like more of like a vaguer way to do it. I think the reason that we did this too, though, is like definitely like a time thing.
Yes.
Where
Yeah.
it's like, well, we want to get through this, and it's
Yep.
fun to roll random things.
Yeah, imagine if we had had like 5 rooms, all like the first one we went through, like for both sides. It would have just
Would
been
have taken forever.
Yeah, forever. So I think it was really smart. I really liked the drawing of cards. We've talked about it before. There's a solo game called Among the Stars.
Yeah.
And you can play it with 2 players as well, but it's based off of a deck of cards, which you do something kind of similar with. I kind of think that in any future games that if I do travel, that's going to be how I do it. Because I enjoy it every
Could you
time.
describe it? I don't know.
The Among the Stars?
Yeah, I'm not
it's
familiar with it.
A deck of playing cards.
Yes.
Each class, so clubs, spades, all that kind of stuff, or suit, I should say, have specific meanings. Like spades are a geological phenomenon.
Yeah.
Hearts are a social encounter.
Got it, yeah.
Things like that. And then each number also has a vague category that you go in. So when you pull a card, it's like, oh, I got a geological phenomenon. It's a 4. That means that there is a sort of like natural disaster situation, and it's like, okay, well, that's a volcano then. Like I come up with that. Oh, I have stumbled upon this like volcanic valley and I have to cross it. How does that work? And so it allows some for
And
some
the way you
variance.
resolve it is just through RP, or
Through RP, because that game is purely, it's more of a journaling game than anything
Gotcha.
else.
Right.
But, you can
That's
play
cool.
with 2 player, very fun. But I would say it's
I think that is a very cool way to do it.
yeah.
I do like that.
I just like the random variance that gives you, and allows it allows for you to have the discovery of travel.
Yeah, and I think that that is one of the big things. It has to be unknown travel, because if it is a path that you have, well, it doesn't have to be. It's better if it's unknown travel for something like that is very
Because that's like, oh, a volcano pops out of
Yeah,
nowhere. It's
yeah.
like you
Oh,
knew that there was
I
a
was in
volcano
the middle
coming.
of Boston. Where the fuck? Yeah. How did I miss that?
I think you could also, because exhaustion specifically in D&D, we're talking D&D mechanics, exhaustion is not very well utilized in the rule system. I feel like you could do it in a way of like, okay, 1 point of exhaustion, like traveling straight until you get 1 point of exhaustion is a deck this big. If you are going to go below that deck, you will not be exhausted when you stop for the night. And this allows you to do the thing that you were talking about of like, you could choose to take a bigger deck to get there faster, but a certain amount of cards is exhaustion. Another
Right.
amount
Wouldn't
of
it
cards would
be-
be several things of exhaustion.
To get
Shorter
somewhere,
decks.
yeah,
Yeah,
smaller
shorter
deck
would
would
get you
be
faster.
Get you faster.
You'd run into less things on your way, right?
Right. I guess what I'm trying to say though is
Faster
like,
without reward.
yes, faster without reward.
So like you're not taking the time to look at the edges of the map and find the things that are hidden here. You're hurrying through. There's less.
But again, that's less cards.
No, I guess
Yeah,
I
less
get what
cards.
they're saying.
Yeah.
I guess what they're saying. Yeah, no, I get what you guys are saying. How would you do it then, where you can essentially like spend points of exhaustion to like keep the deck the same size, maybe? And if you don't spend the exhaustion, the
I do
deck
not
gets
understand
bigger.
your system.
So let's say this. So like you're trying to get to Waterdeep to the vampire house that we were going to. It was a 8-hour trip.
It was like a day and a half,
A
yeah,
day and a
something like
half.
that.
Let's say a day and a half. If you wanted to charge straight through it, a day and a half is going to spend exhaustion. And what would that would do would be to reduce the deck of cards. You know what I mean? So you could spend your point of exhaustion to get there faster by reducing that deck of cards to be like focused cards.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what we were saying.
So,
Yeah.
and then you could say like 2 to keep it even smaller. But if you want to go through the whole thing, then it's like a bigger thing. But maybe you get to stop and rest after each thing if you want, or something
Right.
like that.
So a deck size would simultaneously have to represent a unit of time as well as a unit of exhaustion.
Yeah, I guess because originally I thought it'd be the other way around. Like we're gonna spend no effort in exploring this area, and that would make the deck bigger.
Yeah.
But it would also, you'd have to figure out where the exhaustion points are. It's confusing. I still have to like think about it.
Yeah, you can workshop that.
Yeah.
We'll do an episode where we just make a
make
travel deck.
a mechanic.
Well, I think like the deck building thing is very interesting to me, and I just realized that I actually do. I have played one deck builder a lot. It's called Friday, and you are playing Friday, and you're trying to help Robinson Crusoe survive on
I've
an
heard
island.
about this game. It sounds so fucking fun.
It's really good. It is a deck builder, and like the thing that I was saying before is like you beat challenges on the island to get the power on the card.
Yeah.
Or you spend life points in order to like just get rid of it or something like that.
I really love the idea that like the deck that you have to travel through, that as the players grow in level or just like grow in experience or whatever system you're doing, that they can put custom cards that they've put into the deck of like, oh, you've made this friend somewhere.
Ooh,
and
I like that.
oh,
Yeah.
he's a traveling merchant. You pull the traveling merchant card. It's like, oh, we meet Sebastian. He has like a new mini pony for us to ride or whatever, something like that.
Nice.
Could be a lot of fun. I really like this mechanic. I want to dive into it. I want to make it because otherwise traveling has never felt quite right to me.
Yeah, traveling is tough. I think exploration and traveling I think of as kind of different.
They are different things.
Yeah, they're definitely different.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
I consider this more of a
Travel
deck.
Yes.
We didn't explore
Absolutely.
each of the
That's
rooms
true.
to your point. We
Yeah.
would just
This
come
is-
into these encounters.
This is more of a travel mechanic, not an exploration mechanic. Exploration can come out of it as a result, and your players may engage with, oh man, okay, that elk guy rocked. Let's fucking talk with him more and explore this region more. That can happen.
If we had done that, would you have been like, okay, let
I
me
was
adjudicate?
100% prepared
Yeah.
for you guys to won't do anything like
just
that.
stay.
Gotcha.
Yeah, 100%.
That's fun.
I want to live in this dungeon.
I
That'd
mean,
be so funny if we did that.
Do you guys want to just recreate Delicious and Dungeon?
yes, a
I
little.
do want to play a game that is basically.
I didn't like it.
The thing that I don't
I
like
tried to watch the first episode, and I was like, this might not be for me.
We'll unpack that.
The chef character that I made, because I have like a Karen hack,
Yeah.
and I had you played the chef.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love the show.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Oh, I was gonna say, oh shit, what was I gonna say?
Delicious and Dungeon.
Delicious in Dungeon, but also,
Rio spent a lot of time in the dungeon.
Rio did spend more time in the dungeon, and I didn't
In the
engage
maze
with
part.
that. Yeah, in the maze part, and I didn't engage with it in that sense of like giving him things to do because he was really just hidden in the same room you guys were in.
Yeah.
But narratively, like he spent times, telling the other players, I was prepared if you wanted to go and wander off somewhere.
Yeah.
100% was ready for like, yeah, you could do that. And there are going to be percentage checks to see if you ever encounter any of the other groups.
Like,
But
what
I have a question for the group about travel.
Yep.
Because in our Espers game that we're playing currently, I had you guys, you have to go from Hemlock, a small village, to Sumner, another small village. And on the way, I was like, oh, you guys come across a hermit's fire. And that led you to a whole 2-session adventure.
Yep.
Was that something that was enjoyable, like finding little sub quests as you travel? Or would you think that
I think it's
it would get in the way of that?
I think it's the type of thing that we've talked about before when it comes to travel and when we it's like random encounter tables, right? Where you're just like I like to use random encounter tables as ways to do storytelling in the environment, like environmental storytelling, where it's like, okay, you come across like a dead army, like a dead squadron of soldiers, and it looks like they've been crushed by a rock that a giant threw at them. It's like now you know that there are armed patrols and that there are giants, and that's sort of just how I like to use it as environmental storytelling. And I think that's basically how you used it too.
I just, as an aside, thought that you meant that the giant threw the bird.
Did I say bird?
No, you said,
said
a
a
rock.
rock.
And so I was like,
the mythical creature.
yeah. I was like, I guess they're...
I made a crazy roll. That was it's like, okay, you roll this, you roll that, and you roll
So
this.
now you know there are giants, armed patrols, and monstrous birds.
Yeah, that's
But also imagine stumbling upon.
And the giants are bigger than the monstrous birds.
I think that a giant and this bird fought, and then the giant threw the corpse onto this patrol.
That's pretty-
What a wild thing to
that-
stumble across.
that I know that would be environmental storytelling.
And
That
you're
is
like,
the type of thing
"Holy
that
shit." And you're like, I wonder if this patrol even cared about the giants, or if the giant just threw a bird over its
Yep.
shoulder.
yeah,
So
This patrol.
just like chicken wings.
I
Yeah.
would say yes, Rio. I like
just toss some barbecue wings.
when you have environmental storytelling and it leads to quests and things like that. Sometimes it can get in the sometimes your players just aren't going to engage with things. Like you had the ghost of the woman who was like a specter and she was wailing in the graveyard, and
Yeah.
we decided to not engage with that. Like we said a few things with her, and then we're like, yeah, sorry, and because we had we had other things to do.
Sorry, Queen.
And that's always going to be just kind of a kind of decision for your player of like, do I want to engage with this more or not? But there should always be that option in exploration in my mind.
I think the thing, Rio, is also that because we have a really specific story to get through with Espers right now, that it does become difficult if there are like branches off of stuff where we're just like, shit, should we do that?
I think it's every campaign though.
Yeah.
You're always like,
exactly.
oh, the main story is
not in my campaign. There's no main story. They just do whatever they want.
Yeah, it's because you hate story.
I love stories, and they're creating their own story.
He likes emergent story.
Yeah, I like emergence. They have a story that they're pursuing, and so they'll decide on their own if they want to do that or not.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like everything is relevant. Everything becomes relevant.
Back to like the dungeon delving specifically, do you think that there is a way to use this mechanic to get through a dungeon to like specific points? Like if you use a 5-room dungeon, but you also, because it's a huge dungeon canonically, you have the like ligaments of this dungeon, the in-between parts be this, where you can have them kind of come across a bunch of dungeon
You do one of those
stuff.
you do like a generative dungeon too, where
Yeah.
like each card is a different room.
Yeah,
and then they
something like
connect
that.
in different ways
That could
and
be
that type
cool.
of thing.
Yeah,
And that
very-
was originally what I was going to do.
Yeah, that makes
A
sense.
little betrayal.
Yeah,
sort of
exactly.
method.
But I went
assault.
away from that because it just felt like, nah, it's not quite what I wanted for this specific thing. If I were to reuse this personally, what I would do is, you know, in a sort of traditional 5-room dungeon setup, you know, I'd have the puzzle entrance room, and then I would set a large creature that is way outside your CR capabilities is now chasing you through this dungeon. You know it is hunting you. I would make that very clear. You know, someone gets this information, and then I have my own deck, and you have your deck. And the question is, when
Who's
are we-
making these decks?
You know what you could do? You know what you could do for that too with only having one deck? It's just every time they fail, instead of taking a bunch of damage or whatever, you just move the creature closer to
Yeah,
them.
that's another
You know
way
what
to
I
do
mean?
that.
You could
Yeah.
do that kind of thing
So,
where it's like,
like-
can you get through 5 rooms before
Guys,
the
we
creature gets
we
through?
should make a board game.
We really should at this point. It's just
I really want to make a board game.
I fucking love design and shit, dude. So let's do it.
On that note, is there anything else people want to talk about with this mechanic before we shutter the episode?
No.
Nope.
I'll never use it again.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for listening.
I'm kidding.
For listening to Tabletopped. We will be back next Monday with another episode. If you like what you hear, come visit us on our website. You can get in touch with us if you go to tabletopppod.com, hit the contact form, type us any message. Please keep it kind, and we will be able to answer it.
I guess you.
And-
yeah, please.
I mean, you don't have to, but
Also our
you're gonna hurt our
Discord.
feelings.
Yeah, we also have a Discord, and if you'd like to call Nick directly, it's 6175.
It's 8675-3099.
I just assumed it was going to be one of Shade's clients that he hated or something.
Just send it to him. Be like, this is not who I called. Anyway, if you also want to support the show financially, you can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/tabletopped. But even if you don't, you want to go over there, be a free member of our Patreon. We drop stuff all the time there as well. One thing that I'm proud of is that we kind of went through and made sort of a generative like story hook table that you can use if you ever need to RP on the fly and create a new situation at your table. You can feel free to use it. It's cool. It's on our Patreon. Go check it out, even for free. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.